Needless to say, during the production of this video, I wanted to travel to one of the laser observatories myself and fire a beam at an uncharted area of the moon and see what happens. But it seems the Mythbusters saved me the trouble. On August 27th, 2008, the Mythbusters ran a special on the moon hoax. In this special, Adam Savage and Jamie Hyman make a number of flawed and easily disproved experiments to try and prove that the Apollo landings were real. Towards the end of the program, they discussed the Lunar Ranger experiment. Because we have documented evidence that the US and USSR were bouncing laser beams off the moon long before they put up their respective reflectors, I find the Mythbusters results rather hard to swallow.
Okay, it breaks down like this. A retroreflector bounces light back at the light source, regardless of the angle. This differs from a mirror where the angle of incidence has to be perpendicular. So, if there was a retroreflector on the moon, and we knew its exact location, and we had a powerful enough laser, we could detect the reflection and prove there is man-made equipment on the moon.
What are we supposed to be doing?
Technically, we're supposed to have a conversation about where we are.
Oh, you mean like the Apache Point Observatory? This thing right here is the Apache Point Observatory. What a view. And these guys have the tools that we need to put the final nail in the coffin on the moon landing hoax.
Yep, up here in the Sacramento Mountains, New Mexico. Adam and Jamie meet one of the observatory's top docs, Russet McMillan.
How can I help you today?
Well, it seems that there are some people that do not believe that man has actually been to the moon.
I've met some of them.
What do you think?
I think they're crazy.
A bold statement, but Dr. McMillan has the hardware to back it up.
Here's the thing. This little laser pointer is about 10 milliwatts. That's great, but it's not going to make it to the moon and back. That thing, however, peaks at 1 gigawatt. That's 100 billion times more powerful than this is. That's what you got to have to make it to the moon and back.
This is actually not a bad imitation of exactly what's on the moon that we're shining the laser into. In fact, the specific one we're shining into was left there by the Apollo 15 crew. Now, we're firing on the order of 200 quadrillion photons per laser pulse at that reflector, and we're getting between 1 and 3 photons back per pulse if we're lucky. When we get that photon back, we'll see a spike like that on the screen.
I am slewing the telescope to the Lunar Highlands.
Slew away.
Test number 1, shining our laser at a portion of the moon's surface devoid of all man-made objects, including retroreflectors, known to locals as the Lunar Highlands.
There's the moon. You can see the craters.
Wow.
With the laser pointed at a random location on the moon's surface,
Initiating laser.
Dr. McMillan pulses 200 quadrillion photons into the night sky.
So we're shining the laser on the Lunar Highlands now, and we're getting nothing back except background light.
As expected, the lunar regolith, with its reflectivity index or albedo of approximately 8%, simply scatters the beam, and the sensors back here at the observatory detect no reflected light.
Now I'm going to move to Apollo 15.
Woohoo! Apollo 15, crewed by Scott, Irwin, and Warden, set down at the base of the lunar Apennine Mountains, which is where they placed the retroreflector.
Wow.
That's the location where Apollo 15 landed on the moon.
That is so cool.
Initiating laser on retroreflector from Apollo 15. And there's a spike beginning to stand out.
Is that it?
That's the return from Apollo 15. Light returning from the laser retroreflector at exactly the wavelength and distance that we were expecting.
That is so cool. I know you do this like 100 times a year, but it's really thrilling to watch it happen right in front of us.
Not just thrilling, but conclusive.
Look, I'd love to go to the moon, but I can't. At least not right now. So we did the next best thing.
We shined that laser at the moon on the second test, and we got a clear spike back. Photons came back to our receptor. Now, the only way that could happen is if there was a piece of man-made equipment up on the moon to reflect them back.
So get over it. There's no conspiracy here.
We've been there. We've done that.
Never do they reveal these newspaper clippings that we've just looked at. And despite this historical evidence, Savage and Hyman claim that they received no return signal when they fired their laser beam at a bare spot on the moon.
Test number 1. Shining our laser at a portion of the moon's surface devoid of all man-made objects, including retroreflectors, known to locals as the Lunar Highlands.
There's the moon. You can see the craters.
With the laser pointed at a random location on the moon's surface,
Initiating laser.
Dr. Macmillan pulses 200 quadrillion photons into the night sky.
So we're shining the laser on the Lunar Highlands now, and we're getting nothing back except background light.
As expected, the lunar regolith, with its reflectivity index or albedo of approximately 8%, simply scatters the beam, and the sensors back here at the observatory detect no reflected light.
4 years ago, a ruby laser considerably smaller than those now available shot a series of pulses at the moon, 240,000 miles away. The beams illuminated a spot less than 2 miles in diameter and were reflected back to Earth with enough strength to be measured by ultra-sensitive electronic equipment.
With this in mind, there can be only two possibilities. Either the Mythbusters were lying, or the readouts were electronically set in NASA's favour. The fact remains, if it is impossible to bounce lasers back to Earth off the moon's bare surface, as is claimed in the show, how could the US and Soviets have got the data they released long before Apollo 11? It should also be noted that Adam Savage is a friend of Phil Plait. And the Mythbusters' technical consultant for this episode was none other than, you guessed it, Jay Windley. Both of whom are proven liars and have proven to be totally incapable of telling the truth for years. Despite all the flaws, the moon rocks and laser signals are often presented as the ultimate proof that men have been to the moon. However, there is one final piece of evidence that is used to try and prove that they were real.
It's a real stretch to say the moon landings didn't occur. I think of course they occurred. And I think Australia is one of the reasons we know it occurred, because they had radio telescopes tracking them all the way down to the surface and off again.
From the moment of blast-off at Cape Kennedy until the splashdown in the Pacific Ocean, Australian tracking stations near Canberra will send and receive a constant stream of information on the performance of the Apollo 11 moonshot spacecraft and the condition of its crew. The space tracking station at Honeysuckle Creek has a staff of about 100, and all but a handful are Australians. However, the station and its millions of dollars worth of sophisticated equipment is owned by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration of the United States. When astronaut Neil Armstrong takes his first steps on the moon, Australian stations will be the only ones receiving the television signal.
How important is the role of the Australian stations in this mission?
They're extremely important. In fact, Australia is vital to our role because the Honeysuckle Creek complex here in Canberra is one of 3 complexes in the world which are essential to the Apollo lunar operations.
So you would say that NASA's never had any cause to regret spending so much money in Australia?
Not a bit, no. In fact, the amount of money we're spending seems to be increasing, and as you know, we're building a big new antenna in Australia, which will take more people, more Australians, and we're building it here because we have full confidence in the ability of Australia to staff this station and to do the kind of work that we need to do.
Into this small, specially built room at the OTC terminal in Paddington, Sydney, will come the world's first pictures of man on the moon. From Honeysuckle Creek and this terminal, where will the pictures go then?
The pictures will be sent to ABC for conversion to Australian standard, and via Intelsat 3F4 to Jamesburg, California, from Jamesburg via San Francisco to Houston, Texas, over lines of the American Telephone and Telegraph Company.
The Australian radio telescopes, such as Parkes and Honeysuckle Creek, are often presented as the ultimate independent verification for the Apollo missions. But they are not independent observatories. All the Australian tracking stations are part of NASA's Deep Space Network,